Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Welcome to today's webinar, Nonprofit Tech Trends Leaders Need to Know About. My name is Kara Godleski.
My name is Johan Hammerstrom. I'm the CEO at Community IT.
And so my name's Carolyn, and I'm the Marketing and Outreach Director. So we're going to actually turn it over to Matt to talk a little bit more about fraud, cyber insurance, your nonprofit, and basic cybersecurity. And we have a poll. So Matt, do you want to read what the options are?
Yeah. So Community IT, has been mentioned before. We run managed services for about 6,000 nonprofit staff. We categorize all of those security incidents that we see into an incident report. And so these are some of the types of incidents that we respond to. So we see instances of a compromised account. That's where somebody's user login to Google or to Microsoft or to Salesforce may be accessed by someone other than the intended user. We see organizations suffer wire fraud or some other financial loss, due to gift card buying. We see some organizations being targeted with what are known as advanced persistent threat actors. So those would be kind of nation state or state sponsored actors that are really interested in kind of getting in and understanding what an organization is doing, who the staff are interacting with. We still see some organizations experiencing option 4, kind of ransomware or other kind of malicious software. And if you've experienced something else, then you can go ahead and drop that into the chat. I think what we've seen is that over time, the number of cyber incidents that we're responding to is only increasing over time. That's backed up by some of the data we see from the FBI as well and other industry sources. And so this is a topic that is not getting better, unfortunately, but requires more care and attention. So, so Johan, we got our results there. I think that the results are public here. Great. So we see, folks having a broad range of responses. So
I think actually that people cannot see the results. So I think some people have dropped some in the chat, but actually, let me just go back a slide. So we had about 25% had compromised account. So somebody got access to one of your email accounts. We didn't have anyone responding about wire fraud, which is interesting. We just did a whole webinar last spring on wire fraud and how to protect yourself. Option 3, advanced persistent threat or spying. Got a couple of answers to that, a couple of ransomware attacks. And so I think you're going to talk a little bit about how to prevent that. And then some other dropping in the chat for the malware, supply chain attack, other IT incident, or not having had an incident. So.
Yeah. So I think the nonprofit sector, we didn't ask this as a poll question, but this is some survey data that came out, I think, from N10. But many organizations don't know or don't have those policies in place that we talked about. I think at the time of the survey, about 74% of organizations had not implemented multi-factor authentication, which is an absolutely critical security control. If you are an Office 365 customer, Microsoft is going to force MFA by the end of September. So they're going to turn that on and enable security defaults. So if you've not implemented MFA already, that will be coming. Salesforce did that earlier this year as organizations really react to these compromised accounts, and MFA is a great way to protect against that. We know many organizations are using unsecured wireless and Bluetooth devices. Again, I think in the rush to provide remote work resources and not have firmly established policies, a lot of this has just been, getting people productive and getting to work. And now I think there's an acknowledgement that we need to provide better security controls and more effective protections for staff, regardless of their work location. And then tying that back to, I think, the openness that many nonprofit organizations have, that, anybody can access their data from anywhere and from any device. And again, I think there's a growing acknowledgement, specifically as we have a lot of staff turnover and transitions. If that remote staff person, sync your organization's Dropbox to their personal laptop and now they're gone, what risk does that present to the organization? So I think taking a clear view and doing some risk analysis on what is important to your organization or what could represent a security risk to your organization is a critical exercise. So let's talk a little bit about, I think speaking of kind of trends, is a real change in the landscape around cyber liability insurance. So, many organizations are getting this type of coverage, but what we've seen really in the last year is that there's been a pretty dramatic increase in the cyber liability underwriting requirements in terms of the controls that you need to have in place as an organization. And also the cost has really gone up dramatically. We did a webinar earlier this month where we worked with an insurance broker who talked about the increase in prices. And so they were seeing renewal rates, sometimes double, on average about 155% increase in cyber liability insurance coverage. So the costs are increasing and the requirements are becoming more stringent as well. They're looking for multi-factor authentication on all cloud systems. Anything that you can access remotely, the bad guys can too. So make sure that that is protected. The underwriters are looking for formal evidence of all of these policies that we talked about earlier. They are looking for backups in disconnected systems. Again, the bad guys can get in if they're doing, if they're hacking into your systems, they're pretty sophisticated and they will target backup systems first. So if those backup systems are accessible using on the same network, you're using the same credentials as your production system, then that can be targeted as well. We're also seeing, I think this is a positive movement, but increase in security awareness training. I love all the tech tools that are available for organizations to purchase for spam filtering and device protection, but I think fundamentally the most important thing organizations can do is train and educate their staff. Most attacks are delivered through email and are trying to get, the bad guys are trying to trick people to take some action, to click on a link, to enter their password, to provide that next step of access for the adversary, who will then go in and try to buy those gift cards or open up a new bank account. So understanding the financial risk that organizations face and help connect the dots so that staff feel comfortable and knowledgeable whenever they can evaluate the emails that they receive is a great step to take. So as we talk about data in the cloud, I think this is a question that we get quite a lot, is that, which platform is more secure? Or I'm in the cloud, I'm secure, aren't I? But I think it's important to understand or acknowledge that any secure platform can be used insecurely. So if you're an organization that has HIPAA compliance, for example, you can go with all the big cloud providers. They will provide you compliance documents that they use and that their facilities observe. But if you're an organization and you give everybody admin rights to all the data in the organization, that's an example of insecure use of what could be a secure platform. So again, I think any platform can be used securely and any platform can be used insecurely as well. I think it's important to have that regular training, as we talked about before, to make sure that staff are aware and engaged and know what to do and feel comfortable talking to IT, as opposed to feeling bad and trying to kind of cover up their tracks if they did click on something or if they did have some negative event happen. And then I would say, as we talked about, those passwords and the MFA requirement is absolutely critical to make sure that every system that you are accessing has a new unique password, because what we can see from the data is that once one username and password is compromised, then the adversaries will go and try that login on every other system that your organization may be using. So making sure that your accounts are unique, and reusing passwords is an important step to take. So as we wrap up some of the cybersecurity initiatives, I think just leave you with the 3 bullet points here as the trends that need to be in place at your organization: developing and implementing effective IT policies, making sure that your staff are trained and engaged, and then making sure that you've got multi-factor authentication enabled on any and all cloud accounts that you can access remotely, are really the foundational steps that will make a meaningful difference in improving the cybersecurity at your organization.
Matt, we had a quick question in the chat about if you haven't received security training at your organization. Usually it really does come from the organization. It's not something that you can do on your own, but do you have any advice for someone of who they should talk to? Is that usually something you would ask at HR or your manager, or what would you advise?
Yeah, I would say typically we're seeing cybersecurity training come from the IT department, but I do know that many HR systems are now kind of building it in or including that as one of the options that is included with the online package, and it's included as part of a staff onboarding process in terms of the policies and procedures of the organization. So again, it with your organization, it depends. But I would say, probably IT first. And if they're not engaged, then HR would be the second place to go to look.
And we have some resources that we put here. And I've also been dropping a few in the chat as well to some resources on our site. So we have just a lot of free downloads. There's a couple of other resources here, but I want to make sure that we have enough time to get to questions at the end. So please put your questions in the chat and we'll see if we can answer them. But I want to give you guys a chance to move on to some of these ongoing changes that we're seeing in operations and that we expect to be part of the landscape for a while going forward. So if you want to talk a little bit more about those.
Yeah, and in the interest of time, I'm going to go very quickly through these remaining slides. Each one could probably be its own hour-long webinar, and in some cases it is, and you can check that out on our website. So I'll just talk briefly about each one of these, and if you have questions, if there's any additional questions you have about any of them, we'd be happy to get into it in more detail during the Q&A time. So one of the big questions that organizations have is whether or not they should go with Google Workspace or Microsoft 365. They're both excellent systems. Some are a better fit for some organizations. Some are a better fit for other organizations. And in some cases, organizations benefit from using both. So it's not an all or nothing question. And it's something that we'd be happy to help organizations think through in more detail. Similarly, organizations have a question of whether or not they should go with Windows or Macs. Or both. Both is an option. It does cost a little bit more to manage multiple systems, but there are good business reasons for doing that. So that's another example of a question that organizations might have. If you go with Windows, there's a great new technology from Microsoft called Microsoft Autopilot, which basically allows you to order your equipment from the manufacturer, whether it's Dell or Lenovo or a similar manufacturer, automatically assigned to your organization. And if you have everything configured properly in Microsoft Intune, then that brand new laptop, when it arrives, can be shipped directly to your staff and it'll automatically configure itself out of the box. So that saves a lot of time with provisioning, and we've had a lot of success with Microsoft Autopilot. Apple Business Manager, Apple has a similar program with Apple Business Manager where you can link any Macs that you order or iOS devices or iPad devices that you order with your organization. And then if you're using a mobile device management solution, you can also have that equipment automatically provisioned for your staff out of the box. So this is a great utility for organizations that are using a lot of Apple products, something that's definitely worth exploring in more detail.
Yeah, and I would just add, kind of add on here this. I think the idea is not, either or. You don't have to use Office 365 or Google. You don't have to use Mac or Windows. You can use both, and I think that's part of the trend that we're seeing with a lot of nonprofit organizations is that they're finding the best tools for their organization to use, and kind of integration, as opposed to being really strict about the silos that they're putting folks in. And I think it's good to know that there are effective technology management platforms for both Windows and now for Mac OS as well. What we've found is that, we take a best of breed approach. You can't use tools that were designed to support Windows to support Macs. And so you may need to have, some additional technology tools in place to support that. But you can certainly have Macs in your nonprofit organization, enterprise organization, if folks want them, if they're more productive using that platform, as opposed to just shunting them off into your creative department. So
many organizations are going officeless, but if you still have an office, most organizations that do are going serverless. So no matter what your size is, you probably don't need that server anymore. And it makes sense to look into migrating away from the server. So that's a real trend that we've noticed. One of the few things that servers were still needed for was managing printers. And, organizations would print through a print server. There are now ways to do printer management through a cloud interface. We use a solution called Printer Logic, which can be deployed directly to the laptop. It makes things a lot easier. You no longer need a server, and it will automatically add and remove printers based on which office you're in. So that's a really cool solution, and we're definitely seeing the entire IT environment go serverless. Finally, a quick word. Obviously, we're all aware of supply chain challenges. It's impacted all kinds of industries, including IT. We're actually entering a strange new era. There was a chip shortage you're probably aware of. We're actually now entering a chip. It seems like we're going to be entering a chip glut. Prices have really been dropping on things like GPUs. There's word that laptops are starting to, pile up in warehouses. It doesn't mean that the things are easier to order, though, because supply chain isn't just about chip manufacturing. It's the result of all kinds of impacts on what is a vast, very complicated and large global network around manufacturing and shipping. So our advice is plan as early as you can, place the order as early as you can, and prepare to be flexible. We've had situations where we've ordered equipment and it's taken months to arrive. We've had situations where we've ordered equipment. We're told it would take 6 months, and then it showed up the following month, and then we had to scramble to deploy the equipment. So it's not that there's a supply chain sort of shortage. It's that there's supply chain uncertainty, and it just requires a lot of flexibility and agility to work around.
But I feel like that last piece, Johan, when we talked earlier about the budgeting, is if you know what your hardware needs are for a year out, 2 years out, then you can order as soon as possible, hoping that you'll have them when you need them. So it's just something to be mindful about. So we had another question come in on the chat. Please, if people have questions, we love to take questions, so just put them in there. Cheryl asked, do you need a server for an external database?
I mean, the short answer is no. Many popular databases, I think Razor's Edge is probably a good example. Very traditional client server database used to be, in your office on that server. They now have, and have had for a while, a cloud hosted version of that same system. So again, you can kind of do all the things you would expect to do, kind of directly in the cloud. There may be a need to have some additional data reporting capabilities, but in terms of running a physical server, that's not something that we see many organizations still doing. They're either using the software as a service provided by the vendor, or then supplementing that with some other cloud systems.
Yeah, I think one of the things we found is that the costs of buying a server, storing it, paying for the power, the internet, ongoing maintenance of the server, over 5 years, that those costs can get up into the $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 range. And so for the same price or less, you can just purchase a virtually hosted server with Amazon or Azure and not deal with all the physical headaches that go along with it, and in some cases save money. So we've found that moving everything to the cloud basically has made the most sense in most cases.
And I think that also reflects what we're seeing of people working from many different locations, like maybe in a hybrid office, maybe in an office, maybe in a shared space, like subletted office if people are downsizing, or, working from a coffee shop or working from home, being able to have that access. There used to be a whole bunch of different hoops you had to jump through to be able to get into a server. And now I feel like with everything on the cloud, it's a lot more. I mean, Matt, you talked about multi-factor authentication and making sure those logins are secure. But if you have a secure login and you can work in the cloud, then you really can work from anywhere, which is we're seeing a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
So do people have more questions? I want to make sure that we have time for questions. Kara, I don't know if you have more stuff that you need to say. You have all of our contact information is here. And I believe we're sending out an email after this to all the registrants where you can get back in touch with us and get more information from us.
Yes, that is correct. We will have a follow-up email with recording and everything. So that'll be all taken care of for the attendees. We do have one more question that did come in from Leah. She asked, can you share a sample of an IT policy document?
I can take that. Hold on, I'll have to grab the link, but I will share that in the chat.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we have about 2 more questions. Oh, we have another question coming in. Let's see. Margot asked a question too. Do you have a good resource for informing a very small shop of IT options that can help with productivity? We don't even know what's out there that might help us. For example, integrating CRM platforms with other software applications or helping with managing social media. Well, I think for even social media, if you don't, you can use something we use Loomly in our with our organization. There's a lot of platforms out there that you can use. CRM, I guess. Do you all have any examples or anything to share on that?
Yeah, a resource that you may already be familiar with, but that we really like a lot, and I'll send it out in the chat, is TechSoup. And they offer courses. They have a lot of free online material, and their mission basically is to help nonprofits of all sizes, but particularly small nonprofit organizations with their technology capacity. And so that's a good resource. For an organization of your size that's very small, you might be able to find a volunteer who could provide you with some advice, or an independent consultant, I think tends to make the most sense for really small organizations. And just sort of getting started, getting their feet on the ground when it comes to IT.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Cheryl asked another question too. She asked, we have a database that we can log in from anywhere, but we were told to buy a new server to fix the issues we've been having, what they have been experiencing with it. Do you have any suggestions on cloud-based databases where client-worker interactions can be recorded?
Yeah,
I was going to say, I think probably what I would respond there is that I wouldn't just kind of do what you're doing now and kind of move that system either to a brand new server or kind of a hosted database in the cloud, but I would really look at what are your organization's requirements, and is there a software as a service application that can meet your requirements? Because I think particularly on that auditing and logging and reporting side, unless you have a lot of really sophisticated tools, it's hard to do that with a database that you have, kind of on a server in your office. And so cloud databases like Salesforce or, Dynamics are really built with a lot of that auditing and reporting built right in, and then you don't have to take all of those additional steps. And so that can be a much more affordable way to get, a high quality and sophisticated database platform.
I just wanted to jump in. I put another resource in the chat, and we can maybe send it out on how to hire an outsourced IT provider and some good questions to ask. So that might be helpful to you if you're contemplating a big project, or if you're being told by your current provider, like, you need to do this big project, if you want to have some ideas of how to get a second opinion.
I just saw a question from Lucinda. Do we have time to answer her question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, people are kind of jumping off because I think it's a little bit over time right now, but yeah, we can answer.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Kara. I appreciate it, because it's an excellent question. And Lucinda asked, do you have any recommendations for non-techie people to evaluate proposals about technical issues, or even candidates for tech type positions? And I think this is something we feel very strongly about at Community IT, that anyone who's delivering IT as a service has to be able to explain it in terms that the average business manager or leader, nonprofit manager or leader can understand. So if you're getting a proposal from someone and you don't understand it, go back to them and ask them to explain it to you. And if they can't, then you probably don't want to work with them anyways. So don't be afraid to ask questions. There are no dumb questions when it comes to IT. And if you're not getting the answers that satisfy you, that's not your problem. That's their problem. And you need to find a new provider to talk to. We've worked with hundreds of nonprofits. Most of the nonprofits we work with have no tech background. And over time, we're able to, at the end of the day, it's their decision to make about technology. And it's our job to empower them to make that decision effectively.
Thank you all again so much for this awesome presentation and great information. A lot of people are really, I can see in the chat, they're thinking about ways that they can incorporate this information they learned. So thank you all so much. And we hope to see you again on next webinar Wednesday. Take care.
Thank you for joining this Community IT Podcast Part 2. You can find Part 1 in your podcast feed if you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.